What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2018 Land Rover Range Rover HSE Diesel. Huge thanks to Land Rover for providing me with this very cool Range Rover to review for you guys today.
Also, huge thanks to the Automotive Video Association for arranging this car and 8 others for the first ever AVA Spring event. The event brought 6 of the best car reviewers in video and myself together to film several iconic cars and some of the top luxury SUVs.
So about the full-size Range Rover, well, it looks really cool. It kind of got a little bit of a refresh here for 2018 to make it look a little more similar to the Velar, although I still think the Velar takes the cake as the coolest looking Range Rover of the bunch, but this still looks really sweet up front here. I love the LED treatments you have around the headlights there with a little monocle, almost circular part there, and then the other LED elements are very cool. Cool LED headlights as well. I always have loved that grille there in the front on Land Rovers. I think it's a really cool look. And I really still like how, it's very streamlined looking as well, and it looks pretty aerodynamic for an SUV. It's not too blocky up front there, and a little bit of a lower hood than some of the competitors and things like that. And overall, I think the front looks really good. And coming down to the sides, I always love these little slats in the doors, so these little gills almost. It's a very signature Range Rover thing that also looks really cool and kind of sets it apart from the rest. I also do like how you have the blacked out pillar treatments. It kind of looks like the roof is floating a little bit, which is something Range Rover started and a few others have copied now since, but looks really good. Now back there you also have some revised tail lamps that do look very cool as well with their new LED treatments there. From every angle it looks very streamlined, and overall I think it's a really cool look.
Right, for the interior of the Range Rover HSE, well, it's a very nice place to be. So anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, you have some pretty soft, comfortable seats here, really nice leather. The only thing about these seats though is there is basically no thigh bolstering. It just is flat, and I guess that should help with getting in and out of it since it's, a little bit higher off the ground here being an SUV. But, it just, if I was doing aggressive cornering, I'd be worried about sliding out of these seats, at least with my legs. I wish there was a little bit of bolstering there, but, again, you're just cruising around in these things. You're not going to be taking corners aggressively, so probably a moot point, but still just interesting nonetheless that there's basically no bolstering there. But the torso support is also pretty good though, so I mean that does make up for the fact you don't have as much on the thighs here. And so overall they're really comfortable seats that also have pillowy soft headrests that are so nice for resting your head on whenever you're just cruising, and overall really good seats still. Next, the steering wheel on the Range Rover, which is really cool and futuristic. I mean, this whole interior, as you can see, is very futuristic looking and feeling. And so, I really like these capacitive touch buttons here on the steering wheel that, there's only a few of them, so it's not too hard to learn. You would think it may be a little more distracting than it actually is. I was cruising for about an hour on the highway in this, and, they never were really too distracting. Of course, you have all the safety assist systems to help you if you do get a little distracted to make sure you stay on course. But anyway, I really like those buttons. They look really cool. The wheel itself is decent. It has a pretty good 9.3 grip, but it's not the greatest grip. It's not quite as comfortable as some of the others, around your thumb area here. And there's no 10 and 2 knots or anything, just a nice smooth leather wrapped wheel. It just looks really great and feels really nice. It's a nice thinner wheel. You have some plastic paddles on the back here that, most people probably aren't going to even use the paddle shifters, but it would be nice in a vehicle that's, over $100,000 here to have metal paddle shifters, but I'm nitpicking there. Next, though, is the gauges here in the Range Rover, which, again, are very futuristic. I love that they're fully digital and look really cool. And there is a decent amount of functionality to them, but I feel like they've kind of underutilized that center portion because you can go through a bunch of different menu stuff and, pull up various things, but most of the time it just defaults to a picture of the car, which is nice. It's still, I really prefer these gauges over some analog gauges, but, it's still, I wish that you could have a little more info on there. Maybe the map or something like that would be a nice addition like you see in some other competing vehicles. But overall, still really cool and really nice graphics and everything on the gauges as well. And you also do have a heads-up display as well here in this one, which is an option, but, we'll show you your speed, recognize road signs, all that type of stuff as well, and so nice to have that. But coming over to the center area here now, this is really the centerpiece, and especially in these new 2018s, it's really impressive. So we'll first start up top here with the top screen, which is a really nice widescreen touchscreen, high-resolution display that's pretty responsive as well. The only thing I will say is, your volume knob is all the way down here at the bottom. There is no tune knob. So, for example, whenever you're trying to scroll through radio stations, you have to tap it, and sometimes not every tap takes, and you have to do, multiple taps. But otherwise, it's still very responsive. I mean, I love how you have, I believe it's actually a card-based satellite imagery that you have here for the maps, which is really cool. So it's not dependent, I don't think, on any kind of cell phone signal or anything. But it's just really cool to have, the satellite imaging there, because otherwise you just only have a couple other companies that offer that. So that's really cool. And of course, being touchscreen, thankfully, there's not any controllers to fiddle with. So, punching in addresses and things like that it's all very, very simple. The only thing I can complain about, though, is it still does not have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is the one thing that separates this from being a basically perfect infotainment system, in my opinion. I love it otherwise, but that is just such a sore exclusion. And so because of that, I have to knock it a little bit, but otherwise a really, really great system. And then coming down, you have an even larger screen here, which is really the newest part for 2018 here, that is just so cool looking. It'll control your climate stuff. You also do have the little physical knobs, thankfully, and that will also display your actual temperature and number in there. And that's how you change that, but you can also change the seats. Like this one doesn't have the massage function, but if it did, you could do that in there. Otherwise, it just does the heating and cooling function. That's also where you can pull up your vehicle settings, and it's all just very nicely illustrated. Again, not necessary by any means. You could have a little knob or something for drive modes, but to have it on this screen, I think is pretty cool. Maybe a little distracting, again, because you are looking down at this one instead of up like at the top screen. But I honestly, all the buttons and stuff are large enough, and it's pretty easy to use, that it's not too distracting in my experience so far. And it's nice because, for example, if you have the maps up on the top screen here, a couple of the functions you can pull down and have them on the lower screen here if you'd like, such as phone or also the radio media stuff can be displayed down there if you want to keep the maps right up top here, which is also really well thought out and a cool little setup there. And then coming down, you have this little gear shifter that rises up out of the bottom there, which is such a cool thing. They've had that in Jaguars and Land Rovers for several years now, but it just never gets old for me. I still think that's super cool. And then you have a few basic buttons back here for the off-road mode and stuff that are in addition to the modes you see there on screen. And so, yeah, I mean, thanks to all these screens, there's very few actual physical buttons, but it gives it a really futuristic feel. As far as storage space in the Range Rover, it has plenty. So first off, in the doors here, you have a large map pocket that doesn't have an actual bottle cutout, but it's wide enough towards the back here you could lay a bottle down, I think, pretty easily. So a good amount of space there. Coming over to the center here, you have these two cup holders that are nicely covered by this very heavy cover. It's got a very strong resistance to it. You also see a little key slot there, and also you can slide it forward and backward and have a massive, huge, deep area, and that's where you'll also find a USB jack. And so that's really cool to have, and just a ton of space there. I don't think anyone's going to complain. Even if that was all you had, that would be plenty. But then you come over to this, and you have this Land Rover Range Rover tray here with these little fold down armrests in addition to the regular center armrest, which is nice because these come out a little bit further, but you can obviously just flip them away if you don't want them. And then you have the center armrest, and all this isn't too softly padded, but does have a very nice leather on top of it here. But it would be nice if it had a little more cushioning. But anyway, you open that up, and it's, again, dual layered. So you have the top layer here, which has a nicely rubberized mat, so you could put a phone or something like that that's slim in there. And then you open up this bottom portion, you'll see first off an HDMI port. I'm not sure what that's about, but you also do have two USB jacks, which is really cool. And then you have another little slot here, and then a very deep area down here that's not super wide, but again, so deep you can fit tons of stuff in there. And so it's a really well thought out storage solutions here that are very creative, and just makes the best use out of all the space available. So overall, excellent amount of storage space. And even if you want to go beyond the driver zone here, the passenger side also has your typical glove box, but then up top here you hit this button and this whole thing flips down, and then you have even more space in there for the passenger compartment area there. So overall, just an abundance of storage spaces. Backseat space in the Range Rover is pretty good. Now, I believe this isn't the long wheelbase version, so that might be why there's not a ton of rear seat room. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have maybe 3 inches to spare there. I honestly thought it would be more, but you know, it still is a very comfortable back seat, and you also do have power recline for that back seat as well, which is a very cool feature. And then you also see, looking forward, some air vents there, as well as your climate controls for the rear occupants there. You also will see vents up in the roof as well, and even the grab handles are lined in leather, which is really nice. Then you have a fold down center armrest there, which has 2 very nice cup holders with metal bottoms, which is pretty cool, and another little storage space in there. And they're just, again, super soft leather, very comfortable and luxurious feeling seats. You'll also see, you know, some pockets in the doors there as well. And so overall, you know, really nice back seats still, as long as you don't need a ton of room. Trunk space in the Range Rover is really cool. It has the clamshell thing with the top and bottom opening separately, and that's all powered, by the way, which is really cool, especially whenever you go to close it. The way that you know, the bottom part kind of lifts up, and it's pretty cool, because usually sometimes that bottom portion is a manual thing, but to have it all totally powered is really cool. Anyway, though, whenever you're looking in that back area there, you will see just a ton of space. Again, a nice large square area, being a traditional, you know, SUV shape. You'll also find a traditional power outlet back there as well, which is great to see. And overall, just a really nice large amount of space that you know, should be plenty for anyone. All right, so start them, go for a drive. The Range Rover here is this very nice, hefty, nice heavy key that just feels really good. You have, you know, some buttons there, and the nice metal on the side here. And anyway, it's a keyless entry and push button start, of course. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2018 Land Rover Range Rover HSE diesel. So the first thing you notice is the diesel engine is pretty well subdued. So, you know, a lot of older diesels, you really heard them. They were really agricultural sounding. This one is pretty smooth, and I mean, you really don't hear it even much more than a regular engine. I think it's right on par with what you get from a regular gasoline engine, which is really impressive since diesels usually are noisier. Other things to note here, though, a very smooth ride. I mean, these roads aren't too bad here so far, but you know, it just obviously soaks up the bumps really well, especially here in comfort mode. It has that air suspension, which really helps to cater the driving experience to exactly what you want, and especially in comfort mode, it does a really good job of, you know, soaking up all the most of the road imperfections really well. Visibility is also excellent here in the Range Rover. I mean, you have a nice large windshield. Of course, you have a very high seating position, which always helps. Pretty thin A-pillars here too, which is appreciated. So, you know, not any obstruction there. View out of the sides is good with nice low window sills here, and then view out of the back is also really good, thanks to that middle headrest being a little bit lower, so it doesn't really block your view. And so overall, a very easy vehicle to drive despite its size. You know, it still really feels like you're driving around a big bubble, honestly. But we'll go ahead and put it into sport mode here for the transmission. Let's turn down onto the straight road and see how it does. Here we go. Okay. It just wanted to leave it in that higher gear and just pulls very smoothly, though, I must say. Very elegant in its acceleration. It didn't feel like it was rushed, but it did a pretty good job. So anyway, the Range Rover here with the diesel, it's the 3-liter turbo diesel V6 that does 254 horsepower, 443 pound-feet of torque, though. So it's a torque monster. That really helps. And it's quick to downshift here, especially in sport mode now. But so that torque really helps to get it up and go. I think it's about 7.5 seconds 0 to 60. So again, not lightning quick or anything, but for a nearly 5,000 pound SUV, I think it's, you know, pretty respectable. But I've put the whole vehicle into dynamic mode, which should help with cornering here as we go around a couple of corners. Nothing too tight, but just to get a sample. And honestly, I mean, it's a little floaty, but it's not bad. It still is, even in dynamic mode here, it's not going to be super stiff or set up for any kind of tight handling. But I think it does, you know, feel pretty good. These are just so nice to drive, you know, they're just, again, so smooth. I mean, these roads are now starting to get a little bit bumpier, and I mean, you feel the bumps a little bit, but it just soaks them up so well that you just kind of just glide along, really, and feels good. Other things to note here, steering has a nice light weight to it that feels appropriate for this vehicle. You know, it still has a little bit of heft to it, so it's not artificially light or anything, but just feels good. Also, brakes have a decent amount of dead travel before you really get into you know, the meat of the pad there, but they do feel good, and it's a very natural progression to the brake pedal, just what you would expect. Throttle response is still a little dead, especially in dynamic mode. You would expect it to be a little bit sharper than it is, but it's not bad. Again, I think this, even with everything set up into sport mode, this thing is just tuned in the diesel version to just rely on that torque and just leans and leans on those low RPMs. I mean, not that this thing revs very high. I mean, redline seems to be just barely over 4,000 RPMs, but now that we're up at some slightly higher speeds here, still going around some corners, but it's amazing how, you know, you don't really hear much road noise. Wind noise is also very subdued. Everything just, again, feels very, very polished, you know, and it just feels great. You know, this is one of those vehicles that, you know, it's ideal for just cruising, you know, listening to some music and kind of kicking back and relaxing. And speaking of the music, I did already have a chance to try out this Meridian surround sound system, and it sounds pretty good. Honestly, I was a little underwhelmed. I thought it would be a little more powerful than it was, because even on the highway, just to get decent sound out of it, I had to crank it up to about halfway before it got nice and loud. But you know, other than that, though, it does have a nice crisp sound to it. But as we go back and forth on this winding road here, that's where you still feel that it's still, I mean, you can see how this thing wobbles when I'm going around corners. So still, even in dynamic mode, I mean, I feel like maybe this air suspension only has so much adjustability, at least in this version. Of course, the awesome thing about Range Rover is they have, you know, all the sporty versions. You can get the Range Rover. The Sport obviously would be a little sportier than the regular Range Rover here, of course, and that you can get the SVR version, all that type of stuff. But you can also get the supercharged V8 in this if you wanted more, you know, aggressive power plant in the Range Rover here. But as far as suspension setup goes, yeah, you're gonna want the SVR version of the Sport if you want something that really is a sharp handler, because otherwise Range Rovers are set up to be comfortable and soft, and that's certainly how this feels. You know, I wouldn't want to push this thing too hard into a corner, honestly, because it just, you know, it's not set up for that. One thing you can certainly tell this vehicle was definitely made to do was highway cruising. It is spectacular. Like I said, I already spent about an hour actually on the highway in one of these, and it's just really nice to cruise in. You know, you just put on the adaptive cruise system, and you know, just have the lane keep, all that kind of stuff on, and let the car kind of you know, just assist you while you just comfortably relax and cruise. Speaking of cruising on the highway, though, that is one thing, thanks to the diesel efficiency, this is pretty remarkable. It does 658 miles between fill-ups, which makes it a great long-range cruiser, especially, you know, in addition to all the creature comforts and safety tech, to be able to, you know, go that long between fill-ups is really awesome. These are rated at 22 in the city, 28 on the highway, for a combined average of 24, which again, for a vehicle that weighs 4,953 pounds, to be getting nearly 30 mpg on the highway is, again, something that still only diesel can really pull off. You know, the turbo gas engines can get, you know, pretty close in some applications from other manufacturers and stuff, but this diesel is still really the king of efficiency, and so it's pretty impressive. You know, obviously if you were to hammer on it, you would reduce that cruising range, but whenever you're just coasting and this, you know, transmission's in its 8th gear, just you know, idling along, I can easily see how it would obtain those numbers. The last number we have to talk about, though, is the pricing, because, you know, Range Rovers are not cheap. All this luxury and comfort comes at a price. Now, the HSE trim here with the diesel starts at, I think, around $96,000. This one, as tested, is about $108,000. And still at $108,000, you don't even have massage seats still, which, again, I know I'm sounding real nitpicky here, but, you know, in a vehicle over $100,000, you know, that's just an option package this one doesn't have. But, you know, that's a sore exclusion where a lot of other vehicles are in this price range do offer that, you know, in the SUV segment here. But otherwise, I think it's a really solid offering for that price. You know, I think it's one of the highest tech ones on offer from any manufacturer. I mean, with these, all of these screens are huge and very very futuristic. The looks, I mean, it's a signature Range Rover looks. It's always been a very prestigious and luxurious vehicle that's been made famous over the years, with their following, and I think also they've improved their reliability over the years, which helps, although I think that is still something that isn't going to be as rock solid as something like a Lexus or something like that. But I think they have improved all that kind of stuff a little bit as well. So overall, although you may be paying a little bit of a tax for the Range Rover brand and the awesome looks, I think all the tech and everything you get in this is makes it feel like easily a $100,000 car. All the luxury stuff. I mean, the fact that everything is covered in leather. I mean, even like the grab handles up here are nicely padded. Everything just feels very premium everywhere that you touch for the most part. And so overall, it's a very quality feeling thing that just feels so solid and very luxurious. So anyway, huge thanks once again to Land Rover for providing me with this Range Rover to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.